Big, fast, complicated, smooth, pointless, extravagant, classic Honda weird.
Okay, so I didn't feel like doing a song this week because I've been playing the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I just... priorities.
This is a class of motorcycle no longer made in the 2020s. The Sport Cruiser. It's a standard, upright, naked motorcycle with a long frame and a cruiser-sized rake. Engine sizes of sport cruisers in the 1980s range from 700 cc's to 1,200 cc. This 1982 Honda CB900 is 900 cubic centimeters. Most of these bikes, most sport cruisers, were four-cylinder, air-cooled inlines. Although this one also has a small oil cooler there. Engines on sport cruisers were sometimes directly borrowed from early fairinged sport bikes as well. This 900 makes 84 horsepower at 8,500 RPM, and that's pretty similar to what my GSX 650F makes. It's fed by four 32mm Keenan constant velocity carburetors. The top speed of this bike is 124 miles an hour, and it's 611 pounds wet. Power goes through a 5-speed transmission and then a magic marble machine. And that brings us to the CB900 Showcase, a 2-speed transfer case. What? Yep, a transfer case. Like an ATV, or a 1960s 4x4 truck. The gear ratios between high and low range are subtle enough that you can use either high or low for your riding, and there really isn't much difference. When you see me rolling around here, I'm using the high range. You can shift also between high and low range on the fly. Just go. Just pull the clutch and shift like you're shifting anything else. Now, it's kind of tough because the rocker shifter for the transfer case is on the same side as the shifter. It's just behind it, and it's tucked way up close to the crankcase. So I can't shift it without taking my eyes off the road and looking down there and trying to get, because that shifter is about the size of the delete key on your keyboard. Now, if you wanted to shift this bike through every ascending ratio, it would go like this. First gear low, first gear high. Second gear low, second gear high. Third gear low, third gear high. All the way up the line, you get it. Matt, the owner, treats this case like a 6th gear. He keeps it in the low range, shifting up to 5th gear low, and then engages the high range in 5th on the highway. But I will concede that if you're commuting around town, the low range is better, because I feel that when I'm pulling away in first gear high, it feels like I'm slipping the clutch just a little bit too much at these traffic lights. Not a huge deal, but enough to make me, kind of think about, am I wearing the clutch material just a little bit too much? I'm probably not. But now that I feel that I have the option, I feel like I should be using it. So halfway through this ride, when I was at a light, I shifted it back down into the low range and just kept it like that until I got on a back road, until I got up to about 50 miles an hour. And then I thought, it feels like we're tacked up a little bit too high. And then, okay, get it into high range and keep going in 6th. But then, of course, you slow down again, and it's like, oh. So why does this exist here? Well, because this was one of the biggest parts bin bikes Honda ever did. It's a mix of the Euro CB900F. In fact, that's where the frame comes in. It's just been stretched. It has it's a shaft drive, but to transfer... Okay. The CB900 engine is meant to be a chain drive, and the output gear is on the left-hand side of the bike. And there still is a sprocket there. An output gear and output sprocket. But they use the rear shaft drive differential off of, I think, either the CX500 or CX650. And that is on the right-hand side of the bike. Okay. They could have made this a chain drive, but they insisted this bike have a shaft drive, but the only shaft drive diffs take up power on the right. So In order to get the power to go across the bike, a small enclosed chain is connected to the output shaft, which then goes to it then goes 90s into a jack shaft, which is just a term for a drive shaft going perpendicular across whatever vehicle it has. Jack shaft to throw the power to the right-hand side of the bike. It then has to 90 again and go through a real drive shaft to the rear diff. But when they did that, they found that the ratios were too low. And if this was to be a sport cruiser for cruising on the highway, you can't have it tacked up that high. So Honda built or sourced a transfer case to put in the middle of this contraption. When Matt said he got this bike and said it had a transfer case, I didn't believe him until I saw it. I've never heard of the CB900. I've heard of the sport version, like the full-on sport bike of this, but not this thing. And it's heavy. But this 611-pound bike handles like it's a bike 100 pounds lighter. Push the bike willingly, and it goes on an angle, as if it forgets how big it is. Even the squishy air suspension doesn't hurt the handling. I don't get it. I'm dodging manhole covers at the last second, and the bike, it doesn't protest. It wants to play. I mean, it's not flickable, but this thing's as heavy as a Harley. Maybe it's down to these handlebars. These are aftermarket handlebars. The original handlebars were those awful buckhorn bars that Japanese manufacturers put on their cruisers to make them look Yankee. Now, these flat bars here are way more comfortable, and they make the bike look badass. So should you buy a 1982 Honda CB900 Custom? Oh, and by the way, custom means nothing. It's just a trim level. Well, do you like checking 3 different oils on a bike? Engine, transfer case, and rear diff? Do you like starting a large displacement air-cooled carbureted engine on a crisp morning? Do you like letting it warm up for 5 minutes before you can move it? Do you like waiting for this Valdez level of oil capacity to get up to temp? Do you like waiting for the torque to make its way through the clutch, 5-speed gearbox, input shaft, output shaft, secondary trans gears, the main drive shaft, bevels, and another set of gears in the rear diff before it finally reaches the tire? In total, there are 20 gears, 6 shafts, 12 bearings, and 3 torque cushions and 1 U-joint. There is a delay. There is a noticeable delay between when the revs rise and when you actually go. It's not a bunch, but it feels like a little bit of a slinky going on here. I mean, even for a cruiser, this pause while you wait for the torque, that's unreal. All this gets you is a quarter mile in 12.76 seconds at 105 miles an hour. And that's 0.2 of a second slower than a CB750. And since this is half European, half American, and was made in small numbers as kind of a short-lived experiment, well, you want to replace these front disc brakes? $390 for 2 rotors. But on the other hand, there's a coolness here. A coolness only matched by a CBX 6-cylinder or the Honda CX500 and CX650 Turbo. To most people, this is just a motorcycle. But to gearheads, this was Honda making a jungle juice party drink out of whatever ingredients they had left over from last night's Rager. CB900 Custom. I don't know what I have. $1,500 OBO. My local shop doesn't want to touch this. CB900. Brought to you by, is that cam chain or the gearbox chain making noise? If you want a casual bike, this isn't for you. Get one of the Honda Nighthawk series. If you want a curious gas station conversation piece, something classic that will bury the government-mandated 85-mile-an-hour speedometer all day, then yeah, maybe you should get one of these. Because this is the last of the big, high-tech, air-cooled 4s before everything went to liquid cooling. And by that I mean an air-cooled flagship. This was meant to sit at the top of Honda's line. This was an aspirational bike in 1982. And after this bike, air cooling started to become regulated to beginner bikes, off-roaders, and maybe boutique bikes for nostalgia. They no longer were at the front of the brochure. Honda CB900 Custom. This is Roger Moore in A View to Kill. He's letting you know he can still throw a punch. Even with the delay, in torque, it's still a fast bike, and it's really smooth. Even with all the complexity, they rubber mounted everything, including the engine. Rubber mounting an inline 4. They don't really need to be rubber mounted, they're smooth as they are. Nope, they rubber mounted on top of that. This is way smoother than my modern Suzuki. In the 80s, having this bike would be the equivalent of having a bike with a single-sided swing arm. You don't really have to have that, but ooh, you look so, I'm a little bit better than you. There is a bit of going on with this thing. But now that over 30 years have passed, you can look at the CB900 Custom and thought, wow, Honda had balls to make this. And they still run. I mean, look at it. If you're into investing, speculating on maybe boutique bikes are going to be valuable someday, and you don't feel like getting that, the big inline 6-cylinder or the turbo bikes from the 80s or classic BMWs, the CB900 Custom is going to be a good buy. I see them on Bring a Trailer. I see these things anywhere from $5,000 to, I think the highest ask for one of these things was maybe $9 or $10 for one in immaculate condition. Some of them you'll find naked like this. Some of them you'll find big windshields that may have been factory options, or even those Windjammer kits that were popular in the 70s. But the next time you're at a bike meet, you see an old Honda, and you think, that's interesting. Go look at the left-hand side of the bike and try to see if that old Honda has a second gear shifter there and this little oval case. Then you know you're looking at one of the rare transfer case bikes.
Oh, wait, actually, no, I do have a song. Let me go grab it real quick. Just hang tight. I'm gonna put my socks in a Ziploc bag so they don't stink up the rest of my case. I'm gonna put my socks in a Ziploc bag so they don't stink up the rest of my case.